Hi, Primas.
Bienvenidas. I'm Roxy,
I'm Giselle.
and this is the For Las Primas podcast. Thank you for joining us for another fun episode.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you to everyone who's listened so far. We've gotten such great feedback, and it feels good to know that we're not alone in what we're feeling and
Yeah.
that you guys resonate with us and our struggles. And for my mother, I comb my hair. You're welcome.
For those of you who did last time, you know that Giselle and I are long distance besties. So we're not really primas, but we are primas because our moms are best friends and we're family friends. Our families are very close. So I don't ever get to see Giselle on the regular. And so I just want to say it's nice to see you and your
I
face.
know. I missed you. I was actually looking forward to this, our recording. And somebody asked me and they're like, oh, do you guys record like in the same room? And I was like, I wish.
The struggle of long distance besties. So what's new with you? How have you been? How was your week?
A lot of doom scrolling, but I'm
Lot.
trying to be more mindful in my time that I spend on social media and not trying to cloud it with doom scrolling. But it's hard because things are crazy these days.
I know. It's all so gloomy. And, in the beginning of the year, we talked last time about mantras. And one thing that I do a lot is that in between my work meetings, I will scroll my phone. So I've really tried to stop that. And that's led to so much productivity throughout the day. I'm not my brain isn't distracted by some bad headline or some sad story or something like that. But then at night, I'm like, oh my God, I need to catch up for hours on all the things I didn't do. And it's tough.
Yeah. Yep. You're
How
gonna have to excuse my fire detector because it's low on battery, so you might hear the beep. I apologize.
a little beep, beep.
Just a little beep beep here and there. And a beeper.
Why did I beep it? Okay, so to open us up today, I don't know if anybody watches Premio Lo Nuestro. I don't, to be honest. I'm definitely more of an American pop culture girly versus the Latin world. I do dabble and I do love Spanish music, but I think I'm more in the know of current artists in the Grammys versus Premio Lo Nuestro. By the way, before I get into this, Giselle, do you have a favorite Spanish song right now that you're into?
I just can't stop listening to Bad Bunny's album on repeat. It's a problem because it's been out for 3 months now, I think. And it's the only thing I'm listening to. But I was also listening to, and I recently just saw Latin Mafia, which is this group of 3 guys. And they do kind of alternative Spanish music. So they're kind of vibey. And I've been listening to them recently. Not one song in particular. What about you?
I've been entering my Camilo era. It's a
Oh,
we love Camilo. His voice is so beautiful. The songs are so beautiful. There's a song called Querida Yo, which I think he's featured on. I can't remember the artist name. Sorry, artist. But that song is so beautiful.
Isn't that the song that he does with his wife?
Is that his wife?
Yeah, wait, there's controversy there.
Wait, hold on. I need to look it up. But tell us the controversy while I look this up. Okay.
That she's a Nepo baby, and then she married Camilo, and my mom doesn't like her or her father. She didn't get into the details. She did not get into the details.
Okay, no, it's not with his wife. His wife's name is Eva Luna Montaner. This is with Yami Safti, who, by the way, I've also listened to her radio, and she's brand new to me. I don't know too much about her. I just found her through this song because Camilo is life right now. And so this song is so beautiful. Highly recommend to everyone.
I do really love Camilo. He is a poet. I think he's more of a poet who just happens to sing really well.
Yes, and I love his mustache. He's got a cool vibe.
He's so cool.
I think this is a good intro to our topic today, which is acculturation. But Becky G won the award for Mariachi Ranchera Song of the Year called Por el Contrario. Again, I don't listen to too much Becky G other than for reggaeton stuff, but I did see a clip of her acceptance speech on the socials, and it was so beautiful. She said, Mexican music is a part of my childhood, the music my grandparents played. I am the granddaughter of immigrants. All the opportunities, the reason I am here fighting for my dreams for many years is thanks to my grandparents, their sacrifices, and the example they are for me. It is a pride to be a Chicana born in Inglewood. Yes, I am from here and there. Mexicans aren't going anywhere. And I just thought that it was so interesting because we've been so called to have this space to talk about like the in-betweeners, and there's so many of us. Through this project that we've put together, I feel like, Giselle, you were talking about how so many people reached out to you. Same to me. I've had a lot of friends who are non-white, who are white, who are not women, who have been like, wow, I'm so interested in learning more about this, like living in between two worlds. It feels so current right now. So I wanted to share that Becky G moment. I thought it was really beautiful. And we talked about our parents' sacrifices for us to be here. And we talked about it from like, guilt, right?
Yeah.
All that comes along with that. But you just want to say that there is something really beautiful about feeling appreciative and feeling like your life has a bigger purpose you're not just like existing, you're existing because like in this place and time, thanks to somebody else's decision to create a better life for you.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. That's so true, though. It is. Yeah.
I brought my cafecito today.
I have my cafecito too.
We are recording at night and having cafecito, and I told Giselle, I'm like, are we about to make a cafecito? She's like, yeah, but it's American coffee. It's okay.
I'm like, esto no nada. This is American coffee.
The most Cuban thing we can say. Today, we want to talk about acculturation. And so I took a model from a cultural psychologist from the 80s. His name is John Barry. And he developed a model of acculturation to explain how people from one culture learn about and join a new culture. So we're going to super simplify this. This has a lot of layers. It has a lot of dimensions. But for the sake of today, I thought it would be really fun to talk about the 4 parts of the model. And Giselle, we can talk a little bit about how we feel about them or what we identify with. So the 4 parts of the model, one is assimilation, and that's when you adopt the dominant culture and reject your own. Separation is when you reject the dominant culture in order to preserve your own culture. Integration is adopting a dominant culture while maintaining your own culture. And the 4th one is marginalization, where you reject both your own culture and the dominant culture. So talk about like definition of ni de aquí ni de allá.
Yeah.
So based on those 4, Giselle, which do you feel like you identify with the most?
So I feel like right off the bat, I'm connecting or feeling more so with assimilation because, I grew up speaking Spanish and the teacher was like, we don't understand anything she's saying because she doesn't speak English. So then I started to speak English. And then my mom, I had 2 other siblings and they didn't speak Spanish. Or teach them Spanish, and just right off the bat started teaching them English so that they could not have the same problem that I did. And then, just from there, I feel also like when I lived in Orlando, I felt like, okay, I didn't have so much of like an identity crisis because I was surrounded by my culture more so. But ever since I moved to Tampa Bay too, it's like, very American, predominantly Caucasian, and just like more assimilating into that. What about for you?
Yeah, it's tricky. I feel like I've gone through phases of all of them in some ways. Maybe not marginalization as much, but definitely, I think growing up, I feel similarly like assimilation. I spoke Spanish at home, but I grew up in New Jersey and it was a predominantly white Jewish area where I grew up. And so all of my friends were white Jewish women or girls. I guess they weren't women yet, but we were all kids. And I remember feeling sort of embarrassed that my parents had an accent and felt sort of embarrassed that like my mom wasn't like the other moms in the sense of like, they all bought like Juicy Couture tracksuits and like Ugg boots. And my mom's like, LOL, like we are not going there. We're going to JCPenney and Macy's. And that's where
Totally. That was such a thing. Like all the kids had like Abercrombie, Hollister, never.
no,
Old Navy over here.
Navy. Yes. Old Navy, Abercrombie, LOL, Hollister once in a while.
Yeah, I don't think ever unless like somebody gifted me a Hollister shirt. I'm like, thank you. I'm cool now.
I know I'd get my sister's hand-me-downs, which was cool because she was 8 years older than me. So she had like very cool style. But so I feel like growing up, it was assimilation. But when I was in 10th grade, we moved to South Florida and I went to a predominantly Venezuelan Colombian public school, enormous school compared to where I'd come from. And I felt like the dominant culture was Latin culture. And my Spanish was not up to par. I remember like not really fully understanding all the things they were saying because their accents were different than like the Cuban accent. I spoke very like home Spanish, like
Yeah.
what my parents taught me. So then I think, I went to college. I felt like assimilation too. Like a lot of my friends were like white in college as well. And it wasn't until like my maybe like mid-20s where I was like, wait a minute here. What is all of this rejection of like who I am and who I'm not? Like, I'm all of these things. And that's where like my journey with integration started, where I feel like I am both. I am American and also I am Cuban American and I am Latina. And in spaces where I've been, where there's like a lot of white women, I recognize very early on that I don't quite belong there. And I almost feel like I belong more now in my 30s. I feel like I belong more within like Latina spaces, but still, right? Like I was born and raised in the United States. And I come from a place of privilege too. Like I'm not an immigrant and my family always did all right we did okay for ourselves. So now the space that I'm at, I almost feel a little bit of like separation where I'm rejecting dominant culture in a way. Because dominant culture right now, if we think about like the political landscape, it's very anti-immigrant. It's very anti-diversity, equity, inclusion, DEI, right? Like it's become this like negative word. And I have a hard time when, I feel like on social media, sometimes I'll like write things against like Trump supporters and people get offended and they're like, how could you write this? Like, you're talking about me. And I'm like, well, on the flip side, you're supporting an administration that's mocking immigrants, undocumented immigrants. And the only thing that separates my family from those people is a piece of paper that says you're here by process, right? So if we continue to make the process difficult for people to become citizens and they're not able to obtain their documentation, like I reject that. I think that part of what makes our country so great is the diversity, is the Latino community, like are the culture meshes, the melting pot, right? So I feel like I'm in a unique space where I don't feel super American. I feel like I want to defend the Latino culture because it's beautiful. It's who we are. It's where our families are from.
Yeah, I definitely like feel that and 100% agree with that. And then it's also kind of sad for me because US, I also like side note, hate when we say America. The US is also my home. Like I grew up here. I was born and raised here. And it sucks that like I'm not agreeing with what's happening in my home. And now I am feeling like, okay, like where can we go? We got to leave. And it's just kind of ironic that like our parents felt that way and left to come here. And now their children are feeling that way.
Absolutely. You bring up a good point. Like, I am starting to feel that way as well. And we have been for a while. Like, for us, living abroad would be such a great opportunity for our son to experience new things. But also, it would feel really hard to leave my family. It would feel really hard to leave the comfort of what I know. And all the people I love are here. And it's really brought to the surface my parents' own experience of leaving. I think people have an idea of immigration where it's like, oh, you just come here to take our resources. And it's like, well, you don't actually know what their day to day is like in the countries. When I was 13, I visited Cuba, and that was a really eye opening experience for me when I went to the place where my mom grew up versus where we were living in the US. I was like, wow. And all the kids I met were so happy and they just had this like, because it's all they knew. And for me, I just felt so sad that that was what the conditions were, that people were being persecuted by the government, right? And you had to believe in a certain ideology. If not, you would go to prison. And in some ways, it feels like we're falling into that in our own country. And that's really hard too, right? Because
Very crazy.
our parents came here for freedom and we're not really seeing that freedom of speech play out.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. I had some primas from Florida reach out to me and express how they were feeling about being the in-betweeners, like we like to call them. And, I was thinking, okay, like different experiences for each Latino, like white passing Latinos versus people of color Latinos. But the similarity for us was that we felt like still when we were around mostly US and Caucasian people, like we could tell really early on that we don't fit in here.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to talk about colorism, and we're going to do a whole episode on that. But definitely being white passing is a privilege. I am definitely white passing to a certain extent. I feel like a lot of times I open my mouth and then people are like, ooh, where are you from? Like I lived in Montana. I live in Colorado now. Colorado's a little bit more diverse, but Montana was definitely that of like, I'd hang out with my girlfriends and very early on I was like, ooh, actually I am different. And I do want to acknowledge that I do have a privilege in being white passing. And it's really hard for people who don't have that same privilege and they are in spaces where they're a little bit more discriminated against or racially profiled.
Another common thing that they said was that they felt like if they spoke Spanish better, they would feel closer to their culture, which I think is just like part of the assimilation that our parents did and then disconnects a little bit from the culture.
In your experience with your sisters not really speaking Spanish, like how has that affected them, or how has that differed in their dynamics with your family than your dynamic?
I don't really know because honestly, I feel like growing up in our household, I don't really notice anything different. We would just all be like a little level of no sabo. It was normal and like everybody was normal. Nobody said anything about it. In our family, like my grandma, nobody ever said anything about criticizing our Spanish speaking. Whenever we do speak Spanish, they just are like, whatever. But it wasn't until I'm around other Latin people that I'm like, okay, well, I'm not like, I don't feel this way now. But growing up, I did feel like I'm not Latin enough because I would speak to my parents in English and they would speak back to me in Spanish. And still to this day, my parents speak to me in Spanish and I speak back in English. It's just like our dynamic and it's whatever. But now I've accepted like any level of Hispanic, any level of Latin is Latin enough, like for sure. There is no enough. But back in the day, yeah, like in high school and middle school, yeah.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point. For those that are listening who don't know what a no sabo kid is, it's basically a kid who grew up in a Spanish-speaking household but speaks very little Spanish. You say no sabo because you can't conjugate. It is so hard.
It's hard.
It's so hard. Like, let's just put that out there. And I agree. So to all of our no sabo kids, to all of the people learning new languages, to all of the people who try, thank you. Continue to do it. Even if you don't do it well, continue to put yourself out there because that's how you learn. And yeah, no
and you're doing great, sweetie. I'm learning Italian right now and it's hard. It's hard. Like I can read it and listen to it. I completely understand. But speaking it takes a lot of courage to speak another language that isn't yours.
It does.
So good for you. And I'm proud of you if that's you. Another thing about being an in-betweener is the struggle of code switching. Did you read anything up on code switching?
Let me just tell you, it is a superpower. A superpower.
Every time I try to do some research, I am like, let me just bring it down to a very elementary level.
Please.
For myself to understand. Why do we code switch? And I'm thinking like from my personal view, like I code switch because my brain just thinks like that. It thinks sometimes in Spanish and then I like me tranca la palabra and I can't get it out. But some reasons why people would code switch would be just to adapt in different social circles and avoid judgment for being seen as too Latina or not Latina enough. And I thought that was just interesting because I have done that to adapt in different social circles.
Absolutely. Me too. Especially like in my 20s and in college. I was around a lot of American people who were not super open to like diversity. And back then, like I didn't realize what it all meant. As I've grown older, you learn more and you gain more experience, but totally like try to like make yourself more, I don't know, make yourself more white maybe and just like not let that side of you come out. And can we just like, it is 2025. Can we normalize being too Latina? in white spaces. Please.
Yeah, literally. Well, I will say sometimes I also don't like being put in that box because then my white friends will be like, oh, you're so spicy. You're so Latina. And I'm just like,
Can we normalize not calling Latinas spicy also?
period. Let's not call Latina spicy anymore. Like, please.
Yeah.
I am, but like, still, that's just me as a person,
Right. If you
not
have
as a Latina.
if you have an opinion, or if it's like, she's so
Yeah, literally. If you just have an opinion.
totally.
But some of the struggles that I looked up with code switching is feeling like you constantly have to adjust who you are, feeling exhausted from switching between identities all the time, frustrated. I like we talked about last time, not feeling fully American, not feeling fully Cuban, and then just like overall having an identity crisis, which I feel like everyone kind of has an identity crisis, but ours are kind of unique in the sense multicultural people's identity crisis is a little bit more unique to like not feeling like enough.
I feel like the older you get, the more settled into who you are. You feel just like more confident. I feel like in this stage of my life, I see my code switching as a superpower. And actually, I find myself making like really deep connections with people who speak Spanish and English because we can just go back and forth and it's so much easier. Like our conversations are like half in Spanish, half in English.
Yeah.
And I love it. I love that. I think
Because
that
you
it's
can
beautiful.
get it. Actually, one of the primas from New Jersey wrote in. New Jersey, she lives in Pennsylvania, but she wrote in and that was her struggle was she feels as though some things she just can't explain in English the way that a Spanish speaker would understand. And I totally get that. There's no translation for some things.
Okay. Give a word. Give a thing that's not translatable. Okay, I'll start.
I can't think of a single one.
Cocotazo. How do you explain a cocotazo? Te voy a dar un cocotazo. And your mom would say, I'm going to give you a cocotazo. That means you're about to get spanked upside the head or something.
Something is coming your way in the shape of a coco.
Did you get chancletas thrown at you?
Not really, but I did get slapped. I did get some backhands.
Some
Did you
back.
get chancletas?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, I know my aunt used to say, te voy a plantar. She's about to plant you down into the ground. Fulana o casa ajena?
Fulana's a good one.
Fulana's a good one. How do you explain fulana? Like, esa fulana, like...
Fulana de tal, da 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 da.
No soy fulana de tal.
It's like when you're gossiping about somebody and you're like, that one, but that one doesn't hit the way Fulana does.
Yeah, fulana be hitting. She hits different.
Fulana. What was the other one you said?
Casa ajena.
Casa ajena. That's a good one. That means like a stranger's house.
Also, facha. En esta facha.
Oh, what does facha mean?
Facha. Facha como like, you're gonna go in esa facha? I have to translate that to my husband all the time. And it's like, I don't know what to tell you. I'm just not wearing this. Okay. I guess like what outfit you're in, but it's more than the outfit. It's like the facha.
Like your whole vibe. Like your whole
vibe.
Your whole vibe is off.
Mm-hmm.
Trasnochar. Do you know what trasnochar?
Mm-hmm.
Trasnochar is when you're like up all night and you're like, that's trasnochar. Like you stayed up all night.
Never heard that one. For the longest time, I didn't really know that. This might be a me problem, but I didn't know that like placemats or placemats, we call them doilies.
Yeah.
You too? Okay. Maybe there's
un doily.
Doily. And I was like, hello, aren't you going to put the doily? And then my white friends are like, what? I'm like, the doily.
Some Cuban ones is la guagua.
La guagua, yeah.
La guagua is the bus. La yuma. You know what la yuma is? La yuma is the U.S. That's what they call the U.S.
Oh.
La yuma. I don't know why that's so funny.
Why Yuma? There's not even a Y in the United States.
Also, Cuban names are the funniest thing.
Oh, so actually names was actually on my notes. How we change our names to assimilate.
Mm-hmm.
That's a big one. And I think I try to, I'm always like, I'm going to pronounce your name. I would think for my mom being Lisette and people always calling her Lisa. Even Giselle. I mean, people can't pronounce Giselle at all.
Those people need to go somewhere different if they can't. Get out of here.
I don't have a nickname. No, it's Giselle.
Yeah, my parents gave me a full-on American name. It's Roxanne. Like, not even Roxana. Not one person in my family calls me Roxanne. My grandma used to say, porque tu nombre es Roxane. Sure, yeah. But also, like, in Hispanic households, or at least Cuban households, or maybe just my household, Bounty was king. There was no other. If you bought the generic brand, don't show up in my house.
Don't show up. And Pampers too.
Pampers? Yeah.
I don't even know how to say that in Spanish if it's not a pamper. Like, I don't know the word for that.
Bitch.
Pamper, that's it.
And I think, like, too, we both, like, come from a lot of privilege, and that, like, we were able to sort of, like, be able to assimilate to some degree, but also keep our own culture. I feel like integration is huge within, like, Cuban culture. Like we said last time, like, we grew up with, like, the repetition of, like, Cuba and the history and where our families were from. And, like, my mom was not lenient like yours with Spanish. I remember when I was around 9 years old, I only wanted to speak in English. And she went through this spell with me where she's like, you can speak to me in English, but I will not answer you. So she would be like, yo no sé inglés. I'd be like, well, yes, you do. You do know English. You're not answering me. And she'd be like, no, yo no entiendo. Sorry. Yo no entiendo. Dímelo en español. And she, like, pushed me. It was like I went through a long rebellious, like, spell of, like, not wanting to speak Spanish. And she's like, hello.
But I mean, looking back at it, yeah. But, like, now I'm like, I'm glad she did that because your Spanish is so good.
Me too. I'm super thankful she did that. And, like, she maintained the culture. Like, I always knew growing up, like, where I was from, there was always, like, arroz frijole, you know.
Yeah. Always like going to school with your school lunches and like bringing un arroz con frijoles while everybody else has a sandwich. That was a thing, girl. I would bring pollo empanizado, not chicken nuggets.
Totally. No chicken nuggets. Or if they did chicken nuggets, it was like every now and again my mom would do it. But no, it was like a rice dish in your thermos.
Yes.
And I'd look at kids and sandwiches. I'm like, I just want a sandwich, you know?
Yeah. Food is like such a big thing too, like for the in-betweeners or like just in general, like when you're assimilating, because I feel like a lot of people get bullied for the food that they bring to school.
And it's interesting too, because sometimes I feel like I would come to school and if my mom was like cooking in the morning, because sometimes they would cook in the morning, I would like smell like food, or if I smelled like food, I would get really self-conscious about it.
I know. I feel like kids are mean, and like including myself. Like I was also a mean kid to my parents because I would smell like food and I would be like, "Oh my God, like I'm smelling like Spanish food, like my backpack or whatever." And my mom tried so hard to like not have the car smell like food and stuff like that. And now looking back at it, I'm like, I was such a mean kid.
Well, it's
I would cry if I was my mom. She's so strong. She didn't cry.
Yeah, she's
in front of me.
You don't know. We survived communism, okay? It's not gonna bring her down. But yeah, I know. I feel like it's hard, and kids don't get enough credit for how resilient they have to be when they're from a different culture and they have to assimilate in the U.S. Like, I think today and day, that's, like, even more prevalent than ever, where, like, that disparity is even bigger. Like, being at school, it's so terrible. But kids are already mean to begin with. And on top of that, we have an administration that's, like, pushing this rhetoric. And, like, just kids that are in-betweeners don't get enough credit for how much they have to put up with and also be resilient.
Totally.
It's a lot to ask of them. They're young, and they also, I think that, like, in my own experience, I feel like I went through, like, a stage of rejecting my culture, rejecting my parents, like, didn't understand that I would, like, why are you going to be in brownies? You don't need to be a Girl Scout. You're never going to go in the wilderness, which, like, joke is on them. I've lived in Montana.
Oh my God, how the turntables.
They did not think that one through. She's going to be in the city forever, and she is versatile.
Other prima wrote in from St. Pete, Florida, talking about the theme of traditions and how she feels in between when it comes to traditions because she's from a Mexican background, so she celebrates Dia de los Muertos. How she celebrates that, and she has her altar, but American people will look at it and be like, "That's witchcraft," and they kind of look at it like kind of crazy. Same with like Noche Buena, which we also celebrate Noche Buena and not Christmas. And then, but she also celebrates Thanksgiving, which is not that's a U.S. culture for sure. So yeah, I can definitely see how like traditions and holidays and stuff you can feel like in between. Like when I brought my husband home for Thanksgiving, he's like, I don't even know what the hell. First of all, they eat early. I don't know. I'm over here talking crap as if like Thanksgiving is our holiday and it's not. And
it's not our holiday, but we make it a party. It's a party.
We don't eat till 10 p.m. And they eat at like, I mean, they're probably doing it the right way. We're just doing whatever.
Yeah, they eat at like 2 p.m. and then they like watch football and like do puzzles. That's like a very U.S. way to celebrate.
I don't know, like for food wise, like we do have a turkey, but we also have like congri and like lechon and stuff like that.
There's always pork.
Oh, there's always a pork. If there's no pork, there's no party.
If there's no pork, there's no party. That's how the Cubans roll. That's for sure. I just want to say I am obsessed with Mexican culture. I think they have such a vibrant, not just history, but like their traditions, the way they celebrate their culture, the way they have so much pride in like who they are and what they celebrate. I think it's so beautiful. We do like a little mini Dia de los Muertos celebration at home. And I love the idea of like honoring your dead and having an altar and like making ofrendas. And so to our prima in St. Pete.
St. Pete, yes.
St. Pete, shout out to you. Shout out to the Mexican culture. It's so beautiful.
Yes, very. Shift into chisme, cafecito.
Hey, let's do it.
So a lot of people were really wanting to hear my 2 cents on the Justin and Blake situation.
Everyone's been asking.
I didn't think that would hit so hard, but I will say that it's a lot. The legal pages are a lot. There's a lot happening. I think in a nutshell, I'm just gonna sum it up. She came for the wrong person. I'll tell you that right now. This man has made his livelihood on being a feminist, his podcast, his books. Like this man, he worked on a TV show with mostly women and only like 2 other men for years and years and years during the alleged years that he was like addicted to sex and porn, and he was his worst person ever during Jane the Virgin, like alleged. Like nobody has said anything bad about him or has come out. Actually, people are coming out in his defense from Jane the Virgin. She's been threatening from the beginning to sue him with sexual assault. And the latest news was like she was going to come out and say like somebody else is filing an HR complaint about him. It's not just me. And she had till like midnight to like release it. And then like they never released it. So yeah, we'll see what else happens. But I'm Team Justin. And if you're Team Blake, I am judging you.
I feel like Justin, I've loved him and I've followed him for so long and his podcast. And I think like he does such a great job at like redefining masculinity. And he's always been at the forefront of that and like giving women opportunities. And so I believe women. I'm like such a girl's girl. We're both really big girls, but also have to recognize when things are just and unjust. No pun intended. But I also believe Justin. I've also read some of the court documents, and it just feels like she just didn't get her way and she threw a tantrum, which like, can you think of anybody else that's having a national tantrum right now? So I just feel like I believe Justin. And side note, I hadn't thought about Jane the Virgin in so long, but what a great in-betweener show.
Oh my God, yes. That show I love that show. I do. It's really good. It's written and it's in Spanglish. Yeah, that show's great. That show is great.
And I love the abuelita. The abuelita always gave like the perspective of like the Latinos, and she was undocumented and she went through the whole process too. So if you haven't watched Jane the Virgin, highly recommend. It's a great one. I have another piece of cheese for us.
Oh,
Really cheese, but White Lotus is back.
yeah. Have you watched it?
I watched episode 1. We're gonna watch episode 2 tonight.
How do you feel about the intro music? How dare they change it on us?
That's what I was gonna say. How could they do that?
I know. I was ready. I love that they made that song into like a techno song too. It's like I'm ready to hear that play at the club.
Please. Yes. Anyway, I think it's pretty good so far. I'm curious to see where it's gonna go. I just don't know if anything's gonna top season 2. It was so good. Jennifer Coolidge. Queen. She's the queen. So anyways, Primas, that's all that we have for you all today. Thank you for joining us. We love you, and we will see you next time.
Bye.